So happy to have Ali back on our podcast. Ali, welcome. I'm very excited to talk about, the trends and changes that are happening in the US market, implications on the hiring market, what it really means for companies, and then also what can companies do to prepare maybe for the future or just for the current things that we are currently seeing. Welcome to the podcast, Ali.
Thank you, Laura. It's always so much fun getting to talk to you. And man, we have a big topic to tackle today, and I'm excited about it.
Hi, this is Laura, and you're listening to the CareerBee Talks podcast, where we share all the newest insights on the recruiting world from both sides, the candidate perspective and the company perspective. Let's jump right in. So, Ali, what are some of the key changes that you are seeing? I mean, you being located in the US, what are you seeing? What are people talking about?
Yeah, so I think I've said it a couple times on this podcast already. I think every year brings such big changes and trends, and I think that 2025 is already kicking off with some big shifts in job markets, and not even talking about just the engineering market. I'm seeing it in nursing and manufacturing and industrial. It's everywhere. Our economy is shifting, and I think that's a big point right now.
Right. And I mean, for me, being like in Germany, but looking very closely at the market, because, we're always also working in the US market. I mean, we hear here and there some changes, but now I'm so interested to really learn more about how it is in reality, because one thing is what you hear like in news or whatever, and then the other, like what's really happening. Let's talk a little bit, about the situation on the demographic changes that are happening in the US, also in Germany, by the way. But can you notice something specific based on, the talks that we had with our clients?
Yeah. So right now, I think that we're seeing a really big shift in people that are looking to retire. They're at the end of their careers, they've done a great job, they're ready to call it. And then you have this wave of recent grads and stuff that are coming into the job market, and they're fresh and they're ready to learn everything. But I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing right now, and I don't know if this is an obstacle, I don't think it necessarily is, but there's a little bit of a gap. There's a really big age gap in the job market right now. So, like I said, you have those new age people that are fresh out of college, and then you have a lot of people that are coming up on their retirement. But let's talk about everything in the middle and how we're kind of seeing a little bit of a lack in candidates there. I know, one thing that's brought up to me pretty regularly when I'm cold calling around is, yes, we're open to new grads, but we also need somebody to come in and hit the ground running with experience, has been in the industry for 10, 15 years, but they're not quite ready for retirement. And that's where we're kind of hitting a wall in finding talent, because the talent pool just isn't as big there. And I think another thing why there isn't so much talent in that range, is people are settling in their jobs. They're comfortable. They're making what they want to make. I think that we're seeing a shift in salaries where, if you've been at your job for 10, 15 years, are you going to want to jump into another facility or another career and maybe make the same? No, if you're going to jump into something new, you're going to want to get something out of it. You're going to want to either have a promotion, or you're going to want to have an increased salary. And I think that that's something that a lot of companies are missing right now, and I think that's why they're seeing that gap in their experience levels.
Yeah, and I mean, you now mentioned various topics, and all of them are so important, and we can now also discuss a little bit more. But I feel like starting with the first, where you said like, oh, this gap right away, where people already bring in some work experience. This is really so tricky for companies, especially if we think of the fact that those people that are more closer to retirement, let's put it that way, they are going to leave with so much knowledge of that company that they cannot even pass on. Because if we're talking about people who are just starting their career, I mean, they can take on so much information, but they are just learning as well. And they need a whole different way of onboarding and of, tasks that you give them, versus people that already have those years of experience can tackle on and take on more specific information that would have gone normally like from person to person, but now there's a lack of people in that middle area. So I think that's why it is so important to find solutions. How can we get people and talent into my company, especially at that specific range, so that our company, doesn't lose important knowledge and, specific skill sets that we might be missing out right now. And I think that is so tricky and so important to talk about, and later we can discuss like strategies how you can get that talent. But then you mentioned about another thing, right? Like also then people feel so comfortable that they don't want to leave, which again, like this is so interesting. And I think especially in the US, this might be different in Germany. People are also like, normally I would think in the US you're more open to changes and like to experience new things, because in Germany it always has been that people stay in their job for as long as possible and don't want to move because that's risky. But in the US this is new, right? This is not the normal, the standard. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. That's a lot to unpack there. I would definitely say that I think people are becoming more open to jumping into new opportunity and seeing what's out there. Going back to me saying every year there's a recruiting shift or a staffing shift or something like that, and I think all of the years kind of stacked up, people have kind of realized like, oh, I don't have to sit in the same job that I don't, particularly love or enjoy. That's something that I did. I, got brought to
Mhm.
you guys because I wanted to do something that I really enjoyed, and the opportunity presented itself, and I jumped in at first. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Sounds like an adventure. So
Yeah.
I think that with all of the shifts over the years, I think that people are more open and are
Mhm.
more willing. And also, you have a younger group of people, and that's kind of their mindset moving into this. So maybe we'll continue to see it. Watching this kind of age group grow in their
Right.
careers.
Great. Yeah, and I think this is so interesting. Maybe we can discuss, because you mentioned like your motivation was really to do something that is also new, where you can learn, where you can grow, but that also feels like something that fits your lifestyle, your personality, your motivation. Well, how do you think companies can now attract those talents so that they can make sure, if somebody is switching jobs, how can we get them?
Yeah. Do what Career Bee did.
Well,
Um, no, I think now, because so many companies are jumping on board with the molding to people's lifestyle, giving people a work-life balance. People like that. People want to spend time
Mhm.
with their kids. They want to have time to be able to travel. I mean, look at you. You're able to travel, and you're still doing a great job at running Career Bee and taking care of me and Luca. And
Yeah. And
people
and
want the
I
opportunity to do that.
I love what you just said, right? And I think this is the most important mindset shift that is happening and that has happened also in the last year. Since Corona, I would say that people have become like more conscious of what do I want? How often do I want to go to the company, depending, of course, on the roles. And now companies are like, oh my God, what do I need to offer to get those people on board? And I think this is really it, like thinking from the perspective of who am I hiring, right? Are they engineers? What type of job do they do? How do they normally live? Like really getting into this persona of the person that you're hiring and then thinking about the benefits that could be beneficial to them, especially, I mean, now I am also assuming a little bit, but looking also at the data of salaries in the US. I mean, there is some change going on. Of course, you already mentioned it, but at the same time, companies cannot offer, infinite amount of salary. So now you have to
Right.
get creative, and now you can think about types of benefits that fit the target audience, that in the sense the candidates that you want to hire. And these, what you just said, are great examples, the work-life balance and things like that.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I think our last podcast we made, highlighting these points and, m- getting to know the person that you're hiring is so important. And not only, is getting to know that person, is that going to lead them into doing a good job for me at my company, but are they also going to fit into the culture? Are they going to come in and change the dynamic of what you've already established there? Are we going to have good retention bringing this person on? Because if there's somebody that wants a good work life balance, but you expect them to work 80 hours a week and answer every phone call, that might not work for them. So I think in your recruiting process, I think it's so, so important. I cannot stress it enough to know who you are hiring on so many levels more than just can they do the job.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, coming back a little bit to the changes, because I jumped now into what can companies do based on one of the changes that we saw, which is like the demographic change, salary changes, and how can you act on that. But there are other things that I'm hearing, especially when we look, for example, at tariffs. And of course, we don't know what the impact is and what's happening. But what I think many companies, because they don't know the outcome of how it will look like in the next years, are doing is to be a little bit more conservative, right? A little bit more conservative, especially in the hiring practices. How many jobs do I want to fill this year? Or
Hmm.
who do I want to hire? Now, you already mentioned a great tip that it is like not just hire the best person for that specific job, but maybe also look beyond that. And I think these are also, now talking about tips, what we can do with this additional change. I believe that as a company, you should really try to not only hire the person you need like today, but really also tomorrow. And because we don't know what tomorrow will bring and how it will look like this growth mindset, people that, are very creative, very solution oriented, that might have more skills or come from a different industry that can bring in different perspectives. I think that's going to be more important than ever.
Oh, absolutely. Just in my findings and talking to different companies across several different industries, I think we're at a crossroads where it could really go either way. And like you said, I mean, we don't know what exactly is going to happen. All we can sit here and do is speculate and hope for the best. But I mean, companies really are. They're like, I don't know if we're, especially manufacturing companies and, industrial companies, stuff like that. In talking to them, they're like, we're sitting at this place where we don't know if we should start hiring like crazy and if we're going to get flooded with needs, or, if we need to be a little conservative and, really make sure that we're making the right decisions on who we're putting in here, to make sure that we can sustain and continue to grow if something should happen. So it's an interesting dynamic, interesting place we're sitting at right now.
Absolutely. Especially, as a recruiting agency, we always try to observe very much the market and also try to adapt to the needs. But I also feel that right now is a time where every company is like, not sure, what do
Yeah,
we do?
yeah.
And that also, yeah.
Well,
But also,
I was just gonna say, I think all you can do is sit and be prepared. Um, you know, we I think it's better to have a plan A, B, and C than just a plan A. A conversation that I was having with somebody the other day, is they, let express concern about kind of sitting at that crossroads, and they're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to need the extra help, but should we get large volume of needs, they're like, we're going to be flooded and we're absolutely going to need the extra help. And so having the conversation of, okay, well, it never hurts to have somebody on your side. So I think, like, if you're stuck in a situation where you don't know if you need to hire like crazy or if you just kind of need to sit and hang out, I think that's a really good time to start looking at your options, looking at what recruitment practices are going to be best for you. That way you're not caught behind the eight ball going, what do I do? And then you're stuck. Cause the way life works is anytime you're you're in a jam, that's when you're gonna struggle the most, versus if you're prepared, you have additional resources and somebody on your team that can just sit back and is ready to help when you need them. why not? Why not go that route?
Absolutely. And actually, I think now is the right time also for companies to start working with recruiting agencies if you haven't done that. And I know this sounds like a lot of marketing, but let me explain why. And actually, this is based on a very good practice of a client that we work with. And the client, what they said was, we are not in a hiring pressure. They hire very specialized engineers. And they were like, we don't need them today, but we always want to have a pipeline of very strong candidates. That's why we work with recruiting agencies, because you are the ones who have these access to people who are happily employed somewhere else, because the good engineers are always employed by somebody. And you can, help us access those candidates. And if they are available today or tomorrow or past tomorrow, I mean, you will be aware of that and you will bring them to us at that right time without us having to be on the lookout for that, and being able, especially in these tricky times where you're unsure, to concentrate on our own business, to grow our business, to be focused on that. And then having these agencies being there, finding the best talent, and when they're around, then it might be worth investing at that point. And I thought that was like so intelligent of that company to do that. And of course, it also highlights why it can make sense to work with recruiting agencies specifically at times like these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They're smart people over there.
Absolutely. But maybe, and this was another question that came up and that we can now discuss, because I think this will also add a lot of value. I mean, working with recruiting agency A and recruiting agency B can feel absolutely different. And when I talk about the fact that it is a good time to work with recruiting agencies, it only makes sense if that recruiting agency gives you what you're looking for and what you
Yeah.
need. And so maybe like, how can you identify the right recruiting agency for you? I, of course, have some ideas, but based also on all the calls that you had with potential clients, what do you think are the main things that people really look for when they work with a recruiting agency?
Yeah. So obviously, the first question that I always get is, oh, well, what do I need to pay you? Obviously, the recruiting agency needs to work within your budget. But honestly, at the end of the day, what you're going to pay your recruiting agency should probably be pushed to the side until you make sure that this is somebody that is not only going to work well with you, but for you. So, we talk so much about making sure that we put the right candidate in your role. I think that you need to, if you're going to work with a recruiting agency, you need to understand how are they, first of all, finding people. Second of all, once they get in contact with somebody, how deep are they getting to know this person? What process are they putting that candidate through to make sure that they're going to be the right fit for your job? That way they don't, ultimately end up wasting your time with these candidates that aren't going to be a good fit for your role, and I don't like, to be the final say on anybody. But if I have somebody that comes in and, a company tells me I need a really hands-on mechanical engineer. I have older machines. They break sometimes. They don't even make parts for them anymore. They need to be able to come in and manufacture that part. I'm not going to send them some inside
Right.
mechanical engineer that isn't going to be able to do that for them. That doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. And at the end of the day, that wastes our candidate time, that wastes our client time. And that's not a good dynamic to have. You have a recruiting agency to take the stress off and take the time that it would take you to go out and vet those people. You bring a recruiting agency on to do all of that and then put the right person in front of you, so that the only thing that you need to do is make sure that they're going to fit your culture, make sure they're going to fit their job, and just make sure that you like them ultimately. So that would be my biggest tip when picking a recruiting agency, is making sure that they're putting the right people in front of you.
So instead of asking, how much do I have to pay?
Yeah.
How are you going to make sure you introduce the right candidate that makes it worth to pay you for your job, right? So
Yes,
it's really about that fact, like how do you work so that I like the investment I do, that is worth and pays off. Because I
absolutely.
also feel like, and that's also why we so many times work 100% success based, taking the full risk. I mean, that's really risky for us, but we do it because we really care, and like we always build long-term relationships with our clients. Like our job speaks for itself when we are able to introduce the right candidates to you, and that's why we take that so serious, and we don't want you to take any risk at the beginning, because we're also getting to know you in the first stages, like how do you work. And then I feel like when that matches, it's so wonderful, because then we really become like an extended team, and we really are able to create those matches. And then when you see the right person, like you were just mentioning in that example, when you see the right person in front of you, then suddenly you know, like, this is worth my money, because I
Yes.
didn't have to do anything, and now we have really the best person for the job. And then suddenly it makes sense why you are paying for that very
Yeah.
specialized and very high quality service, right? So I like that you switched around and said, like, don't start with that question,
No.
maybe you start with another question, and eventually we'll of course have to talk about it, but that shouldn't be the main reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and maybe just to add on that, because that's really like, if you ask a recruiting agency about, how are you going to introduce the right candidates, how do you work, I think one good way of also qualifying headhunting agencies or recruiting agencies is by really show, like, let them talk, and let them say either like, oh, we're going to introduce to you like 10 candidates in 1 week, because that is a clear sign that they are like CV dealers. They have plenty of CVs, maybe a talent pool that is not even like truly work through, that they don't even have like real contact to everyone, and they're just going to send them through and like hope for the best and then hope to make some money. Or if the recruiter really takes the time to first of all understand your role, and based on that gives you a better, how to say, like, analysis of how long it's going to take to find the right person, because that shows that this agency really cares about finding the right fit, not just
Yeah.
any type of person.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
CV dealers.
Right. It was not me who said that word. It was Luca. But he said that once, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. There are CV dealers out there. No, but I like that. And again, I mean, these are just some ways of also how to change a little bit the view of why it could make sense to work with a recruiting agency in times like this, because as you see the benefits, right? You're going to find good talent, specialized talent that are currently not looking for a job, while you can concentrate on building your company, doing the work that you're
Hmm.
doing. But then on top, if you find recruiting agencies that work fully success based, you're not paying a cent until you see someone that you really want to hire, right? So it's like a low risk thing that you can do through these times, and then just hire sporadically whenever you are happy with the candidate that you're seeing. That's why I think right now is such a great time to work with a strong
Yeah, with
recruiting
the
agency.
good.
Right. Not the CV dealers. Not naming anyone, by the way. No, but that's definitely it. I don't know, Ali, based on what we said, I mean, we covered vast amount of topics in a very short amount of time, but is there anything that we forgot to mention or to look at when we look at the US market?
I think we've wrapped up a lot. We went over a lot of really interesting topics, and hopefully everybody can
Right.
digest those well.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, then I have to thank you again for another very interesting conversation that I'm very happy to follow up on a next podcast episode. For everyone listening, if you have specific questions, make sure to use the comment section, and we can go more in detail into those specific topics. Ali, see you in our next podcast episode. This was for sure not the last.
Thanks, Laura. See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you are a company who's currently looking to expand their team with amazing talent, make sure to check out our website careerbeat.io to learn more about our recruiting services and how we can help you find the best candidate for your open roles. On the other side, if you are a candidate who's currently looking to find a job in the US or Germany, make sure to explore our website careerbeat.io/talents to see how our masterclass and our additional career services can get you to find your dream job. In any case, you can always reach out to our team via the email team@careerbeat.io. We are so happy to continue sharing many more insights around recruiting and job searching.